So yesterday I did a video on Sandie Peggie, and there's been a lot of interest in it. So I thought I would do a bit more because I've found some more articles which are really interesting to find the reactions of other people and to find out a bit more about what was in the judgment. So the first article that I'm going to quote is from Unheard, and it was written by Joan Smith. It says, sex is assigned at birth. Women can hold gender-critical beliefs, but they should be careful how they express them. Women are sensitive, and challenging them in a women-only space constitutes an attack on their sense of identity and psychological integrity. This is a summary of some of the choicer comments made in yesterday's judgment of an employment tribunal in a case brought by nurse Sandie Peggie against her employer NHS Fife. To be clear, Peggie was not on trial at the tribunal, which was hearing her case that she suffered discrimination when she was forced to share a changing room with a male doctor identifying as a woman. The tribunal concluded that Peggie was harassed by her employer, but dismissed her claims that she was victimised and discriminated against. It also dismissed claims made against the trans doctor, Beth Upton, aka Theodore. But the panel has torn into Peggie, accusing her of impermissible manifestations of her gender-critical beliefs. Like, really, some people just would not be happy unless you just shut up as a woman. You just have to shut up. You can't say anything. It doesn't matter how you say it. Even if you say it in the nicest possible way, they're going to be upset with you. In a jaw-dropping section of the judgment, it even says that some of her comments were, in our view, what amounted to an incident of harassment against Upton. Given the mixed conclusion of the tribunal, it sounded like a score draw, but a very different picture emerges from the full 312-page judgment. Like, 312 pages? Why? Why? The panel frankly admits that its conclusion about Peggie's behaviour contradicts the outcome of a disciplinary hearing, which did not uphold a complaint of harassment against her. It even suggests that Upton was entitled to regard some of Peggie's actions as a hate incident within the terms of NHS Fife's bullying and harassment policy. This is a win for Peggie only in a narrow technical sense. She was criticised throughout the judgment, described as given evidence that in some particular respects we did not consider to be credible. The panel said she denied being biased. What? How can you... it doesn't make sense, does it? But it regarded some of her messages indicative of views which could be described as transphobic. What does that word even mean anymore? It's basically anyone who disagrees with a trans rights activist. Upton, however, was a credible and broadly reliable witness. The panel agreed it was legitimate to cross-examine the doctor on the issue of personal identity, but it could see that Upton was affected by that, even if there was a clear attempt not to show it. So it's terrible if a man is upset about something, but if a woman's upset about it, just never mind, it's okay, never mind, it doesn't matter. It even praised the doctor for not taking up a suggestion by an NHS colleague that Peggie should be reported to the police for saying a man's a man. Like, he's a man and I don't want him in my changing room. It should be the other way around. He should be reported to the police. Not that the police would do anything and captured two-tier policing. The nurse, by contrast, displayed a dismissive attitude towards gender reassignment as a protected characteristic. Yeah, I do too, because it's a lot of absolute codswallop. Like, what even is that? Like, it's a fuzzy definition, isn't it? And I don't think there's any clear, like, like, correct me if you've seen this, but I've never seen any description about what a gender identity is that's protected in the Equality Act. So it could be, so it's basically to do with operations, isn't it? It's nothing else. Gender reassignment. It's about operations. Other than that, it's nothing. Like, it can't be related to saying a man is a man because that's protected by sex. Anyway, to continue. So, what did it say? It's saying that Sandie Peggie was displayed a dismissive attitude towards gender reassignment as a protected characteristic and does not consider that a trans person is anything other than a male. Well, that's because he is. He's a male. What else is he? Because nobody can explain that, can they? What is it? What is this gender? So, to continue, it's a belief shared by most of the population, as it happens, but the judgment explicitly states that it understands the term trans woman to describe a person assigned male by sex at birth, who is undergoing a transition to being female. Well, you can't transition to be female because humans can't change sex, so... This is the language of trans activism, largely discredited these days because sex is observed as a binary fact of biology at birth, not randomly assigned. The panel repeated another activist argument, however, when it dismissed questions about women's safety on the grounds that there is no reliable evidence to show that males pose a greater risk to women in female changing rooms, which is rubbish as well. So, men aren't a threat to women, even though they're stronger than us. Just unbelievable. Despite acknowledging that it can't ignore the Supreme Court judgment in the Four Women Scotland case, it proceeded to do just that. The panel argued that it is potentially, but not necessarily lawful to permit a trans woman to use a female-only space in the context of work. Its argument is that competing rights have to be taken into account, and parts of Peggie's case failed because she failed to take into account Upton's human rights. What human rights? Men do not have the human right to enter female spaces. They just don't. This terrible judgment takes us back to the days when women were supposed to be kind, put men's feelings first, and not even mention safety. Perhaps for that reason it's expressed in a massive verbiage and ideologically tainted language, but even that can't hide its bias against Peggie and her lawyers, and it cannot be allowed to stand. So that's the article that was in Unheard by Joan Smith. Now, the next article, it includes some really great quotes, which is why I wanted to go through it. So this one was in the Telegraph. So, Sandie Peggie's employment tribunal made up new rules on trans women's access to female-only spaces that were incompatible with a landmark Supreme Court judgment, a legal expert has said. Yes, he's absolutely right, isn't he? Dr. Michael Foran, an Oxford University professor who specialises in gender law, noted that April's Supreme Court ruling found that single-sex services should be based on biological sex. Of course they should. However, he said Monday's tribunal ruling had created other criteria, such as a trans woman's hairstyle, clothing, and what surgery they had had. He said employment judge Alexander Kemp had created a new test that was not compatible with the thrust of the Supreme Court ruling. Dr. Foran said Mr. Kemp had also appeared to formulate a second new test that it was lawful for a trans woman to enter a female-only area if no one complained. But the academic said that we shouldn't be inferring from the fact that nobody complained that therefore there isn't unlawful conduct. He said Miss Peggie would have strong grounds for a successful appeal. The nurse and her legal team are expected to disclose their next steps at a press conference on Thursday. Ms. Peggie was suspended by NHS Fife after complaining about having to share a female hospital changing room with Dr. Beth Upton, who was born a male but identifies as a woman. The tribunal ruled that the health board had harassed Miss Peggie but dismissed her allegations of discrimination, indirect discrimination and victimisation. It also rejected her claim against Dr. Upton, who was named as a respondent in the case. Mr. Kemp found that it was lawful for Dr. Upton to use the female changing room at Victoria Hospital in Kirkcaldy, Fife, before Miss Peggie complained, and after they were put on separate shifts. He said that the trans medic's feminine clothes, hairstyle and pronouns should have been taken into account before deciding which facilities should be made available. His ruling also said that there was far from sufficient reliable evidence to show that biologically male trans people posed a greater risk to women in female changing rooms. But Dr. Foran, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, said he shared the view of a lot of other lawyers that the tribunal ruling isn't compatible with the thrust of the reasoning of the Supreme Court in the case brought by feminist group For Women Scotland. On the tribunal saying employers should examine a trans woman's makeup, hairstyle and dress, the academic said the tribunal was presuming that the more you go along this process of medical transition, the greater your entitlement to access these spaces is. He said that used to be the case before the Gender Recognition Act, when our law operated on the basis of surgery and medical transition as a gateway into which you could get access to status as women. But our law has moved completely away from that, and the Supreme Court says this quite clearly in the For Women Scotland judgment. I didn't think the law had ever said that, actually, but that is what men were told in order to get the surgery, that they had to change and live as a woman, whatever that means. Wear clothes, like dresses and stuff. Dr. Foran warned Mr. Kemp's new test would be grossly invasive for trans people. Of course it is. Oh, can I just check to see what surgery you've had, sir? Madam. Mr. Kemp's new test would be grossly invasive for trans people, as it could involve assessment of how much surgery someone has had or seeing how feminine they look. He also said the ruling appeared to argue that the test only applied in workplaces and not public facilities such as swim baths, adding, "It seems very odd that we would imagine there would be dramatically different standards." Well, this is what the trans rights activists have been arguing on LinkedIn for ages, that it's different in the workplace compared to in public. Like, why would it be? Like, I even challenged, what's his name? Thingy Moira White. I can't think of his name, but he was on LinkedIn, and I challenged him, and he didn't argue back, but he did look at my profile. got no fear on LinkedIn, me, like. Citing the ruling's findings that Dr. Upton could lawfully use the female because that person is a barrister. And I challenged him on what the law was because he was getting it wrong. Do you think he was getting it wrong on purpose? What is his name? I'm going to have to Google it. Bear with me. Robin Moira White, that's the one. Yeah, so it's Robin Moira White. I challenged him on LinkedIn because he said that the workplace regulations were different to the Equality Act, and I was like, why would they be? No. And he didn't argue back, but then he looked at my profile. Anyway. Lost my place now. Bear with us. Bear with us. Citing the ruling's finding that Dr. Upton could lawfully use the female changing room until Ms. Peggie complained, he said, The problem with that is that there will be a whole host of reasons for why someone might not feel confident or comfortable complaining about something, and we shouldn't be inferring from the fact that nobody complained that therefore there isn't unlawful conduct. Absolutely. Like, women remove themselves from situations all the time because they're not as strong as men. So they will remove themselves so that they don't provoke a man who might kill them. Like, it's obvious, isn't it? Unless you're a predatory man who's trying to argue a nonsense point. Dr. Foran noted that the Supreme Court ruling remained definitive on the issue and the tribunal decision was not binding on anyone other than the parties in the case. Challenged if he thought the ruling was compatible with the Supreme Court ruling, he said, "I don't think it is." He agreed with Ms. Peggie would have a high likelihood of success on appeal. Bethany Hutchison, a nurse and president of the Darlington Nursing Union, said, "Sandie Peggie has our full support as a valued union member and courageous frontline nurse. We welcome the tribunal's finding that NHS Fife harassed Sandie and how it handled her complaint. Our position is simple. Workplaces must uphold biological reality by implementing single-sex facilities and alternative changing facilities to avoid putting any female staff in uncomfortable, compromising, or even dangerous situations." Joanna Cherry Casey, a gender-critical former SNP MP, tweeted, "The Supreme Court was crystal clear on the definition of a woman across the Equality Act. The Sandie Peggie Tribunal judgment has muddied the waters. In my humble opinion, it's got the law wrong, made some perverse findings in fact, and used biased language. It's not binding but needs appealed." In a statement issued on Monday, Miss Peggie said she was beyond relieved and delighted that the tribunal found she had been harassed, adding that the last 2 years have been agonising for me and my family. However, her solicitor Margaret Gribben said that aspects of the judgment are hugely problematic for women. Absolutely. Leaving the onus on them to object when their privacy, dignity and safety are violated, when men are given access to single-sex spaces. NHS Fife has said it was working through the tribunal judgment to understand fully what it means for the organisation. The Scottish Government has said it will take time to consider the judgment in full. The Tribunal Service has been approached for comment. And that's from the Telegraph. Well, yes, once again, it's women at the bottom of the pile when it comes to rights, isn't it? And that's just not on. So let me know what you think in the comments, because I'd love to know your thoughts and how transgender ideology has impacted you, if it's got you cancelled, if you have been put in a position that's compromised you. I'd love to hear from you. I've got this podcast and I interview women, and if you have a story to share, I would love to get you on as a guest and interview you to share what's happening to women and to spread the word about the awful things that are happening in society at the altar of transgender ideation and ideology, that it's incompatible with humanity and a civilized society.